The rail industry is moving fast. Can you afford to be left behind? We are RTM. We're here to keep you in the loop with rail industry news, giving you an all-access pass to the key decision makers in the industry, and together we'll shape the future of rail.
We are the RTM team. I'm Matt.
I'm Ailsa.
And I'm Emily.
And each episode we'll be chatting to the innovators and leaders in the rail industry, showing it to you in a whole new light.
This podcast is brought to you by Trans-City Rail, the premier rail network and events brand connecting buyers with suppliers.
So welcome to today's RTM podcast. We're joined by Martin Frobisher of Network Rail, and hosting is Emily and Ailsa.
Hi.
So I'm sure you get this a lot, but when I was doing some background research on you, I came across another Martin Frobisher.
Yes.
He was an English voyager.
Explorer.
Yes, knighted for his...
privateer. Yes.
Exactly, yes. His services in repelling the Spanish Armada.
That's it.
1588, I think it was. Any relation?
A distant relation.
No.
But I must say, I can't claim to be a modern-day pirate.
Is he really a relation?
Yeah, I'm descended from his eldest brother.
That's amazing. I was asking as a joke, but I didn't think you'd actually say he's a relation.
So have you ever done any research into that yourself, or...?
There's a good book on the subject which I've read, but yeah, he had a fascinating life.
Because I mean, for you, it's not just the surname; it's the first name as well.
Yeah, the streets are paved with gold is a phrase that comes from him.
Really?
So he went over to the Americas, came back with a ship full of rock that was supposed to contain gold, but it was fool's gold, and all they could do is pave the streets of a Cornish town with it.
Oh wow, that's amazing! You've blown our minds.
That was the question I wasn't expecting you to ask.
Well, we like to start it off with a bit of background knowledge.
So your title is Group Director for Safety, Technical and Engineering at Network Rail. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do within that role?
So I manage the nationwide teams that look after safety, security, environment and engineering. And it's the policy teams, the teams that provide the coordination, that write the technical instructions. Mm-hmm. But it covers a whole range of really interesting subjects, particularly environment, security, safety. There's lots happening, and I think the environmental work that we're doing at the moment will change the shape of the railway over the course of many years. So it's really interesting, and there's lots happening.
And of all of the kind of areas that you cover, what would you say is like your favourite thing about working for Network Rail?
I think my favourite thing is the scope and breadth of all the things that we do. It makes such a difference to so many people, so it's so varied, and it's a job worth doing. And certainly on the environmental work that we're doing at the moment, I think we've got a real opportunity to change the way that the railway works, to reduce our carbon footprint, to improve air quality in the cities. There is so much we can do, and it will make a difference to so many people. It's the variety and the difference that we make that makes it really worthwhile.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's a very sort of prevalent time at the moment with regards to the environment as well. There's a lot of changes being brought in.
Yes, rail is good. It's without doubt the best form of public transport, but there's so much more we can do. I mean, if we can get to the point where we have a fully electric railway powered by renewable electricity, that would be so different to today's railway, and I think we've just all got to get there.
Yeah, and if we had that as well, it would be very hard for people to argue for reasons not to use the railway as well, if we're trying to reduce carbon footprints and things like that.
Yes.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge with regards to safety on the railway?
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to recognise that we have a real problem. We're having incidents and accidents and near misses at a frequency that we just can't tolerate. On the railway, if you think about things that can kill track workers, being struck by a train, high voltage electricity, falls from heights, crushed by plant and machinery, driving vehicles. We've had near misses and incidents in all those categories far too often. There's examples I could quote from recent weeks in each of those categories. The rate at which we're having near misses is a real worry, and I think we've got to recognise that. We've got to tackle it. And the biggest challenge is to, first of all, to recognise the problems that we've got and to deal with it quickly.
Well, when we're looking for stories to put out on our RTM website, a lot of the stories we see come up, sadly quite a lot of them are delays at this station because of an accident, whether it's a worker, whether it's someone has taken their own life on the railway and stuff like that. It happens a lot more than what you would realise.
Yes, and one of the best initiatives that we have, one of the best things we do is our partnership with the Samaritans. They're a brilliant organisation, and they've been training railway employees to intervene when they see somebody who's worried and vulnerable. And the work that they've done really works. So the stats that they quote, that if you can stop somebody from committing suicide, then 95% of the people don't do it again. And it just takes a conversation to snap somebody out of the moment. So the training that we've all had from the Samaritans has been brilliant. It makes a big difference, and I think that's one of the best partnerships that we've had. They're fabulous, and it's really good.
Good. So what would you say you think is the main reason why the safety issue is one that's so difficult to solve?
Because it's about so many people. Within Network Rail we have 42,000 employees, but of course we rely upon a supply chain that is many times larger. And getting through to so many different people, conveying a consistent safety message about why it's so important, getting people to do jobs properly and not take shortcuts. Getting through to so many people is a tricky message, and hopefully with your podcast today we can work on some of that, because it's about getting out to a really wide audience.
Definitely. So I know recently Network Rail's been looking for SMEs and other companies to try and help with issues of safety on the railway, maybe digital or technological.
Yes.
So technology maybe isn't something that affects the rail sector as quickly as it affects other sectors, but how does technology impact your role and make things easier for you, or does it?
It does, and technology will make a massive difference to the safety of rail workers. I looked at a photo recently of it was a Victorian painting of people working on the railway, and they were wearing brown clothes, and there were steam trains and old-fashioned semaphore signals. And as you looked around the picture, you could see, actually, apart from the brown clothes, everything there is there today. There are steam trains around the network, of course there are. There are lots of semaphore signals. The guys that were in the painting were working with lookout protection. We do that on a day-to-day basis. And when you look at the way that we work today and compare it with that picture, it's a modern picture. It's not an ancient painting. Yes, it was painted in Victorian times, but apart from the brown clothes, everything about it is current.
Wow, you see it like that.
Yeah, and technology can make such a difference. So rather than warning people with lookout flags, warning people with modern automated train warning systems, locking out systems so that trains and track workers can't come into conflict, there is so much that we can do with technology, and the new Safety Taskforce that we've set up is working with lots of technology providers and looking at what we can do to adopt new technologies. So we've got to change, and technology will really help.
But it's a big debate, isn't it? Because there's a level crossing in my hometown of Blackpool, and it's recently been changed from a manned lookout to a technological one, and for when the barrier comes down.
Yes.
And you hear a lot of people like, oh, what if it goes wrong? It's a machine. What if it breaks? And people feel like they can rely on humans more easily than a machine. But really, if you think about the world today, we're relying on machines every single day.
That type of new crossing, these obstacle detector crossings, are amazing. So they've got a radar detector that detects a big lump like a car, and they've got a laser scanner as well. And the laser scanner is designed so as to identify a 7-year-old child who's fallen off a bicycle. And it's scanning continuously. It is a brilliant technology.
Well, that'll be the other problem, because people don't know the actual technology behind it.
People won't see that.
They'll think, it's some machine that's pushing a button going up or down, but they won't realise the intricacies of...
The intricacies, the technology is amazing. They are very, very safe and reliable, and adopting new technologies that that don't have human failure modes is one way to make things safer.
I'll pass the message on.
But it's also about safety culture, because the railway employs loads of people who do some brilliant work, and working on safety culture so that we all think about safety. Take 5 seconds to think about safety before doing any job. Safety is partly about technology, but much of it is about culture, attitude, and the way that we work.
And that culture spreads to passengers as well, doesn't it? Because you need to be thinking, if you're right next to a railway track, am I being as safe as I can be?
Yes.
You're next to something that can potentially kill you.
Yes.
So taking things away from your role for a second, and into the more current news that is currently going on in the rail sector, what do you predict will be in is yet to be published, the Oakervee review, which is set to come out?
Now there's a question. It's I mean, look, I'm not going to comment on a report which hasn't been published.
Yeah.
I think that would be wrong. But what I would say is that the panel that Doug Oakervee put together, the way that they've gone about this study has been incredibly scientific. It has been very thorough. The team of people are real experts, and they've done this properly, with proper analysis and thought. So we'll all await the results of the publication, but I've got real confidence that the team of people who've worked on this are the best experts available.
So whatever the decision is, you think it will be the right one?
I think that this panel of real experts were the right people to look at it. I wouldn't prejudge the outcomes and the final decisions, but I've got real confidence that the team who've looked at this have the right technical capabilities.
So obviously an enormous project like HS2, Northern Powerhouse Rail, these really big projects, they come with a large degree of safety elements and concerns, I suppose. How do you work to minimise something on that scale?
Well, first of all, you've got to get the safety right in the design. So, and for long-term safety, getting the design right is so important. You can design systems with lockouts to separate workers from trains. The high-speed network from London to the Channel Tunnel has that. It is so much better than old-fashioned systems. You can design equipment so that it can be maintained away from the line side, rather than putting people right into the path of trains. So design is really important. But then for big construction projects, construction safety is vital, and having good systems, good organisation, professional contractors, and a supply chain who understand the business. I think those are really important.
So what projects have you worked on in your role that you would say you are particularly proud of, or that you enjoyed the most working on and had the best sort of outcome at the end?
What I love is this real renaissance of the railways that we're seeing. So we're sat in Manchester, and not long ago there was a project just north of Manchester at Farnworth, driving a new tunnel through a hillside to make space for the newly electrified railway. And I one day sat on the tunnel boring machine as it was cutting its way through the hillside. Just seeing that we're doing what the Victorians did. For the first part of my railway career, I just maintained railway lines that exist, but now we're building new lines, driving tunnels through hillsides, and doing what the Victorians did. It's amazing. So I loved the Farnworth Tunnel project, the reopening of Birmingham New Street as a station after it had been rebuilt, and somebody said that we'd turned it from a dungeon of despair to a cathedral of light. And it's just amazing. Wow. And then opening the Chiltern line from London Marylebone through to Oxford, a new rail route to Oxford, and the first time that we've connected London with a major city in many years, and the opening day for that as a project, just amazing. We're building new railways, refurbishing stations. Manchester Victoria here was fabulous. So those sorts of schemes where we're doing what the Victorians did and building a better railway, it's amazing.
I always like as well when I read about stories from Network Rail working on like bridges and footpaths that were either listed or very old, and they want to try and keep that kind of Victorian or the old, whatever the old design was, they want to make sure that it's being maintained as it's been refurbished in the modern day.
Yes.
I think that's really important, because for a lot of people the railways are like a heritage, and they're very passionate about them, and they don't want to see everything become too modern, and they want to keep some of the old system.
Yes, I think we need modern service and reliability, but we mustn't lose the cultural heritage. And I think the architecture is really important. And I think that's somewhere where Britain's railways have got it right. We think about architecture in our major stations. Places like St Pancras are really modern, but they're also amazing and beautiful. And I think in other countries, sometimes people build things that are utilitarian. Whilst I think the British Railway, we also focus on architecture, and I think we're really good at that.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to hear positive stories that we're good at something. So how involved do you get then in the supply chain side of things? Is that something that you deal with on a daily basis, or do you tend to stay away from that?
No, so I do deal with key people in the supply chain, safety directors and managing directors of many of the companies in the supply chain. I also work with RSSB, the Railway Safety and Standards Board, which brings together all parties across the industry. I'm one of the directors of the Railway Safety and Standards Board, and that brings train operations together with supply chain and Network Rail to look at the whole system from a safety point of view. So yes. And there's some really good people in the supply chain, and I think we should also recognise that Network Rail has a great deal to learn from the supply chain. There are lots of areas of excellence.
Yeah.
So we're currently starting a safety culture programme within Network Rail, and we've adopted a campaign that was run by Skanska, one of our contractors. I think there are just so many different areas where we should look to the supply chain for innovation, for creativity, for safety improvement, and recognise that there are lots of areas where the supply chain is better than Network Rail, and we should adopt systems, practices, technology from the supply chain. I think that's really important.
Absolutely, and it's easier to do when you're an SME. You've got the room to innovate with you being a smaller organisation.
Yes.
Whereas with Network Rail, it sometimes can become a bit difficult.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of time where we should not try to do what other people are good at. So we've been running a series of hackathon events where we set some challenges, and young computer hackers come along and try and crack the problem.
I think we've seen those.
Yeah, we provide them with data, and a problem statement. So we give them a problem statement and some relevant data, and they find solutions and build apps and that sort of thing. We should not attempt to do that. These guys are really good at what they do. If we attempted to do that ourselves, we wouldn't be nearly as good as these young, innovative, small companies of brilliant young people. And if we attempted to do that ourselves, we just wouldn't be as good. What we need to do is to use their skills, set them some problem statements, provide them with open access to our data, and then see what they can do with it.
Yeah, because you'd like to believe that one day the problem will be solved of, there's never another worker hit by a train.
Yes.
Because somebody solved that technical issue, which means it never happens.
And there's lots of scope in that. So the state of every signal on the network is there on a computer-based interlocking. So using clever technology solutions to tap into the signalling system and use it to protect track workers, there's loads of opportunities.
Yeah, it's within reach.
Yeah.
So you briefly touched on SMEs there. So you are the safety director for major player in the rail industry.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people dealing with this on a smaller level, be it a franchise, an SME, or an individual station?
So that my advice would be that it's all about people. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to look at safety statistics and measures and key performance indicators and scorecards, but you've got to bring it back to people. I've met recently with the families of Spike Lewis and Gareth Delbridge, the people who died at Margam, and when you look at the impact that it's had on their families and the devastation that it's caused, it's shocking. Whenever I've met with people after major accidents, met with their families, met with the people who've been injured, it just brings it home what this is all about. So I would say for anyone working on safety, it's about care, Why do we do safety? Because we care about people.
Yeah.
What's the reason for doing it? To make sure that the people who we care about don't get hurt. So I would say don't think about injury frequency rates or safety league tables. Think about people. We do safety because we care, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, because back in July, Network Rail launched the £70 million track worker Safety Taskforce.
Yes.
What effect have you seen from this huge development?
So we've got started. Across the country, in one form or another, there's about 200 people now working on the Safety Taskforce.
Yeah, so maybe it would be easier for you to tell us actually what the task force is aiming to do before we go into what it's done.
Yeah, so the task force is aiming to change the way that we work. It's aiming to stamp out Victorian lookout flags as a sole method of protection. It's looking at planning our work so that we plan it for periods of time that trains aren't running, or plan it using modern methods of protection and technology. And we've been looking at all the work that we do and how we can start planning it into better systems of work. And we've started buying new technology, and we've started clearing away vegetation, for example, so that we've got places of safety for our people to walk and stand. So we're starting to see some good results. Since the Safety Taskforce launched, we've seen a 30% reduction in the number of people working with lookout flags as a sole method of protection.
Wow, already?
And more importantly, we've seen a 70% reduction in near misses from people using that method of work. So we've seen a substantial reduction in the most hazardous methods of working. There's loads more to do. We're embarking on a 3-year project. We're 6 months into it. The team's got started, the team's got mobilised, but already I'm seeing some really encouraging results.
Can you tell us what you're looking to do in the future, or are there any specific projects that you want to implement? So the use of new lookout warning technologies, or better still, not lookout warning technologies, but systems that are triggered by the signalling or by treadles or devices that are really reliable. So new technology. A lot of it's about planning, though. It's about planning our work into better methods of protection. So lots of different planning, lots of new technology. Lots happening. Yeah, it's really exciting.
So what do you think this new decade we've just entered holds for the rail industry? I know you've briefly just touched on the more safety element, but as a bigger picture, what do you think it holds for the rail industry?
So I think the really big picture for the next 20, 30 years is environment.
And it needs to be.
It needs to be.
Yeah.
So the Extinction Rebellion are right. Climate emergency is real. Yeah. So we have to decarbonise. We have to get to a zero carbon railway. In doing so, we're going to improve the air quality in all our cities. We've also, as Network Rail, are one of the biggest landowners in this country. So we've got to change the biodiversity of the railway line side and of the land that we manage. So we've got to create some grasslands close to the railway with lots of biodiversity and insects and bees. Further away from the railway, lots of trees that screen us from the neighbours, and whenever we cut down a tree, we've got to plant many more. So I think biodiversity, air quality and carbon are actually the things that are going to shape the railway over the course of the next 30 years. And I think we need to get on with that quickly. I think as Network Rail we should be very soon driving an all-electric fleet of vehicles, and we need to put the infrastructure in to do that. So I think ultimately a railway that's powered off the grid, that is powered by electricity from renewable sources, that's got great biodiversity, generates good air quality in the cities that we serve. I think that's the future of the railway, and I think our job as the people who lead today's railway is to get the projects that make that change to happen. I think we need to invest in electrification of the railway. I think we need to invest in the biodiversity of the railway line side. and I think we can create a modern transport system that is great for the environment, and I think our challenge today is to make that happen.
How soon do you think we could see electrified trains across the board?
So, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing massive investment in electrification, sat here in the northwest. Recently, we've connected Liverpool with Manchester with a modern electrified railway. We've electrified north from Manchester to Preston. We've electrified from Preston to Blackpool.
Yes, it's happening.
And it's happening, but more has to happen. We've got to electrify the main lines that haven't happened yet. Lines like Crewe to Chester. Now there's tunnels on that line that are a challenge, and one of my roles as engineering director for Network Rail is to find new technologies that can help us do that more easily. So we've been working on how we reduce the clearance between high voltage 25,000 volt electric cables and bridges and tunnels. So an electrification project isn't just about wires, it's a big civil engineering project to rebuild bridges. If we can find modern insulators that allow us to place the wire closer to the bridge or the tunnel, we don't need to rebuild as many bridges and tunnels. So using modern technology, and we're doing lots of research and development in this area to reduce the clearances so that we can do electrification projects cheaper and better. So those are some of the areas that I find really fascinating, and we can make the biggest difference.
I feel like in a few years you'd like to think that you'd be looking back and thinking, I can't believe we ever didn't use this system.
Yeah, and there's fascinating other technologies. So we're working with a supplier of battery-powered trains who's adopted a submarine technology, because submarines don't want to be charging the batteries for very long, and this charges the batteries in 10 minutes, which is fascinating. And another supplier that's looking at developing hydrogen trains. So hydrogen can be created by the electrolysis of water. So green electricity from renewable sources can generate hydrogen, and hydrogen can power the trains through a hydrogen fuel cell.
And am I right in thinking that hydrogen only emits water?
Yes, so renewable electricity can power a train that only emits water. So I think those are areas that of research that can make a big difference. So yeah, I think the environmental agenda is the thing that's going to shape the railway, and I think it's so important because there is a crisis.
Yeah, we're on the right side of history, you could say.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. That concludes today's episode. Perfectly looking towards the future there. Thank you very much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
This podcast is brought to you by Trans-City Rail, the premier rail network and events brand connecting buyers with suppliers.
Join the chat on social media using the hashtag WeAreRTM, or send us an email via the form on our website.
If you enjoyed today's podcast and discussion, don't forget to subscribe, like, or give us a rating on whatever streaming service you're using. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.